All right, what a weekend of hurling awaits. Leinster final on Saturday evening, Galway against Kilkenny, Shefflin against Cody Part 2, and then on Sunday, Semple Stadium anticipation. Well, it is sky high for Clare against Limerick, a 4 o'clock throw-in in that one. Eddie Brennan is in studio. How are you keeping, Eddie?
Oh, good, Nathan, yeah.
Busy out. We've just been talking off air about the frantic nature of our lives, and I was just thinking it's brutally unfair in this country, the standards of coaching, when you're looking after the hurlers down in, is it what's the club, Craig?
Greg Ballycullen, yeah.
And me, who never picked up a hurl in his life, is somehow trying to teach 8-year-olds down in St. Jude's, the poor Dublin hurlers, no resources whatsoever. and you're on one side, and we're somehow meant to compete in 20 years' time.
Oh, there's nothing poor about you at all.
Give me some tips that I can bring back. What are you teaching them down in Kilkenny at 8-9 years of age?
A big bag of patience. That's what we need. Yeah, look, it's busy. It's a different kind of busy, but it's enjoyable, I suppose. I think definitely what it does teach us is patience and having to taper back your expectations on what it is for young lads. You definitely at times it frustrates you a little bit, but it comes back to, I suppose, them and where they're at. And I think definitely there's times I've had to kind of come back down and say, look, they're just enjoying things, and I suppose you want them to be as good as they can be, but at that age young lads are just there for the bit of enjoyment, and if they're tidying things up and they keep coming back, that's your job really. So
there's a bit of pressure on Eddie Brennan's kids, I'd say, around the place.
No, thank God. There's look, it's enjoyment more than anything else, because when I was growing up, I had no interest in hurling really in primary school, and I used to you're
not in every day with the hurl in the hand.
I used to hide it at the gate. Yeah, it's a funny story really. It went to a point where my mother used to have to follow me out to the gate when I was getting the bus and make sure that the hurling helmet got up on the bus with you, because I used to leave it at the gate and pick it up on the way in, and we had a great match day at school and that kind of crack. So, and
why weren't you keen?
I don't know. Just wasn't at the time, and it was probably a slow burner from that point of view. But I think it was more we landed up to the cousins one day, and my mother's sister was able to announce, no, he doesn't play hurling at all, and the mother nearly fell over. But look, bit of crack in the end. But I suppose the moral of the story is you definitely can't force it anyway.
Yeah. So what age were you when something just clicked?
Probably about 17 or 18 really. Yeah, it was. Wow. You enjoyed it, you loved it, because I was in Kieran's. I can definitely say I was probably a hurler on the ditch a little bit more. I used to go to the matches with my uncle Kieran, up to matches in Dublin, and we'd visit our cousins out in Eggborough there, and that was how I suppose you went to the matches and you enjoyed as a spectacle, and you'd talk a great game at the time. I definitely did. I wasn't really driving into it as hard, but I think the year minor with the club in 1996, we won the minor championship in Kilkenny, and that was the year that it started to drop for me a little bit.
And were you on Kilkenny teams under 14, under 15, under 16?
No, never up along. It was gas. I think Martin Comerford a little bit of 14, but myself, Derek and Martin Comerford didn't up along. And even, we'll say, the 21 team that I made in 99, you had Derek Ling was a sub that day, and Martin Comerford and John Hine were, I think, untugged out subs. And when you look at what the three of those achieved, we'll say, with Kilkenny afterwards. So there's definitely, I suppose, a little bit of a bolter, if you like.
Yeah, but there's a big lesson in there, isn't there? Because the pressure, like, we're all guilty of putting pressure on the kids, and particularly I'd imagine in a county like Kilkenny, where every kid, it seems, goes to school with a hurl, that if you're a kid who's not going in and not enthusiastic and not buzzing about it and wanted to follow their heroes, there'd be a temptation to sort of write them off.
Yeah, there is. And sometimes, look, even with I suppose the research and the science shows, look, if they haven't certain skills picked up by the time they're 11, or you haven't eradicated maybe the bad grips or whatever, that sometimes it's very hard to change that. And I think I heard a story that Wayne Sherlock, I stand to be corrected on this, was left hand on top, and somebody changed him at 17, which is just unheard of really, I think, in skill acquisition. But yeah, there probably is. I think even there's a clatter of us off our team, we'll say, as I refer to Brian Hogan, Henry, Derek Ling, and all our young lads now, all our chaps are all in around that 9, 10, 11, 12 bracket now, so it'll be interesting to see what comes online. I think we're starting to pass each other on the sideline. And where's your lad playing, and you're hoping God, be at the other end of the pitch away from each other, but the competitor comes out in you. But no, for me personally, from my experiences, I think you want them to go and enjoy it, you want them to be as good as they can be, but I definitely know that you definitely can't force it, and you have to let them take to it in their own time. I see particularly with my second fella now, Simon, he just a little bit more relaxed about it, and just slowly but surely he's getting more into it. So I don't know what works exactly hard and fast. But
And were you playing other sports when you were a teenager?
not really, no. We used to it was going to matches. It was going to matches with your parents. My big memory of being younger was going to the tournament matches. Was the big thing years ago, because obviously the county could have been finished early enough, but going to tournament matches, we'll say, obviously Tommy here and myself are neighbours. The Tullaroan tournament on the Pattern Day on the 15th of August was a big day out. But equally, the match that would be going on the main pitch in Tullaroan, the Tom Hogan Cup, there was young lads of all ages playing a match behind the goal, and that could have been equally as competitive. And it was a bit of crack, but I suppose that was where we picked it up, because there wasn't a huge amount of underage matches now, whereas now there's actually under 11 schools competitions going in Kilkenny, little go games as well, and there's lots of games for them, but definitely a lot more than when we were playing.
Yeah. Jeez, that's mad.
Yeah.
I just assumed you were all 8 years of age, and if you weren't morning, noon and night, there was no hope.
Probably I suppose going from my experience, my own father was big into it and hurling with the club, and again he would push, and they wanted you to.
Yeah.
It is
like, am I going to be getting a load of texts in saying, now he's playing it down completely,
genuinely.
And you were the star man in the club at 12, 13?
No, definitely not. 100% I wasn't. I wouldn't have even been in the top 10, I'd say. But the hurling field was the focal point of the club too, in the parish. It just is that way. It's the socialising, and my memories of growing up were like going to those tournaments and having a bit of crack at the matches, and then being rounded up afterwards and heading home, and you'd stop off somewhere on the way home, and whatever the ice creams or the chips or whatever, and that was just our memories of when we were growing up. And that's how, I suppose, little by little it's drip fed into you, because we didn't have, there wasn't under 9s, under 7s, under 11s up along. There wasn't the age groups there that there is now. So under 13 was really primary schools when you got to an age. But we were lucky in the primary school we had, in St Aidan's and Kilmanagh. There used to be, if you were old enough to play then in the mini leagues, we'd say we had 6 teams at lunchtime, and there'd be a little mini league, so 6th, 5th, maybe 4th and even 3rd sometimes if you were lucky enough, and there'd be a mini league and everyone would play each other, and there'd be a table, and then to whittle its way down to a final. And it was brilliant. It was probably conditioning us for that, and our primary school as well. We hadn't a great record when it came to winning under 13 Ryan-A's in Kilkenny, but we got to 12 county finals in a row, which for a rural club was a big achievement to go up against the city club. So
I wish there was video of these Tullaroan tournaments.
Yeah,
they sound epic.
They were epic.
I have in my head, it was probably a bit too early, I have in my head that Cody be down there taking notes even at that age. I'll use this lad in 6 or 7 years time now.
No, I think he was busy probably recruiting his own lads inside in the De La Salle, because CBS and the De La Salle were the big teams in Kilkenny at primary school level, and then they obviously broke into James Stephens and Dixborough or whatever. So no, it definitely wasn't. There was no recruitment at that stage, but the parish rivalry was it, and it just grew from there.
It sounds like you had a real love of hurling, though, of the game and the day, and a lot of memories of travelling to matches and big days and the crack around it and all that. Were you able to maintain that enthusiasm for the stuff around the 70 minutes as you started playing, as it started becoming serious?
Yeah, probably not. That was what I was kind of, that's, as you said, that's where you got hooked on it really, because you had a love for looking in from the outside. And like I said earlier there, I didn't play underage with Kilkenny, so there was obviously an element of craving that maybe, and that's where you were mad to get a chance or whatever. And I wasn't good enough. I make no bones about it. I just wasn't good enough, and equally I didn't get the opportunities. But I wasn't as competitive as I needed to be. I tended to hang around the edges a little bit, and if the ball popped out when I'm good, you'd take advantage of the loose play. And it was only probably in the last year when I was maybe 17, I think we played a league final out in Callan against Dunnamaggin, who were the county champions in 95, and I went well that day, and it just maybe kicked on from there. And like I said, we won the minor championship with the club in 96, and it just springboarded from there really, and I got an opportunity in St. Kieran's under Dennis Philpott. But no, I absolutely loved hurling, and probably maybe loved talking about it too much more than playing it. But I used to enjoy the trips to Dublin to my cousins and heading off with the uncle. I was lucky enough, the parents, they let me off to go with the uncle, and we went up and stayed overnight on a Saturday night or whatever. And as you got older, and you miss that.
Yeah.
I definitely, you miss that side of it, because that's where you get a sense of the passion for it from supporters and there in the hill. And the uncle made a point of mixing with kind of the Wexford and the Offaly lads, and we used to have great old banter. Now, to be hot and heavy, but it was always enjoyable. I think and he always made a point of, look, safe home, and having the bit of crack with them. So
that's good to have that seared into the brain as to what it means to people when you are successful then.
Yeah, no, it does, and I appreciate it. I think more than anything else, when the opportunity came, and I distinctly remember Brian, the phone call landing at home and the mother coming running out. I was poking the ball against the gable end of the house. I think I was on the 21 team at the time, and she says, "Oh, Brian Cody's on the phone," and I was like, "Really? Brian Cody is ringing me?" I dismissed it because I said
landline only back in the day.
Yeah, back at landline only. Fell short of the postman arriving with the letter. But
and was Brian a small talk with the mother kind of guy?
I don't know, but I'd say they probably colluded at stages during the career anyway.
What do you say?
Just literally, we're having there's a match the weekend, or we're having an internal match, and we want you to come in and have a look at you. And I suppose in my head, I start doing somersaults thinking, could I just get into the panel for the All-Ireland in '99? I was away with the fairies and that thinking, but I genuinely thought, there's that, it's like Dumb and Dumber, so you're telling me there's a chance. And I thought, geez, it'd be great to go in, but I just was probably bowled over with being able to go into Nolan Park in the run up to the All-Ireland in '99 and just watch the team playing, and you're looking at Charlie and Henry and DJ in the full forward line, and you're just in awe, really.
And what are you thinking? Are you looking at them three going, I'm a million miles off this, or actually I can now see the path I need to go on to get to that sort of level?
We're probably rethinking where I want to play because you're saying, how do you get in there?
Cornerback looks handy.
Yeah, so just maybe I'll have to look at somewhere else, maybe go around the middle. No, but you looked at them, they were as a young lad growing up, sure, you're reared on DJ and Charlie and all the senior lads. Obviously our own club were starting to be prominent, and we had a couple of lads, Dennis Bourne and Adrian Rowan, were involved with the county team, so you looked at it that way. But look, it was definitely a pinch yourself moment, because I never in my wildest dreams, and again based on having not made the county up along, you just don't think that that's going to land there, but you actually really, really dream about it, and you want it to a degree. But I remember just distinctly that night commenting, I was marking Sean Mealy from Castlecomer, who's a gas ticket, and I was marking him that night, and I was a little bit casual with it all because I was just on cloud nine, whereas he was cleaning me out because he was competing for a place. And I remember just commenting to him at one stage, it was these unbelievable scores, unbelievable movement, and I remember saying to him, geez, they're going fierce well, and he said, yeah, nearly too well. And in later years, I remember Peter Barry commenting that if we were doing an internal match, he rathered that real dogged, rough, low scoring internal match, because then he said, right, we're ready now. Whereas these exhibition matches in training meant there wasn't intensity there, so
it wasn't going to be a reflection of what was coming at the weekend.
No, it wasn't. And in fairness, look, we ended up, I remember being on Hill 16 watching that All-Ireland, getting absolutely soaked wet, but my overriding feeling coming out of that match was, right, we have next weekend, we have the 21 All-Ireland, was the older way, where the 21 All-Ireland was the week after the senior All-Ireland. And I remember we were just incredibly focused, and we had a good crew of lads, and straight away I was fierce disappointed for the lads, because you had maybe got a small little peep in, and you were very disappointed for lads because they're after losing the previous year. And we, the killing thing was, we had the club captain at the time. We had won the county final in '98, so Dennis Bourne was captain, and it would have been a brilliant thing to be able to get Liam McCarthy, into the club. That was obviously the big thing at home in our own club.
Just to stick with this then, as you're moving through the career, how long till the sort of imposter syndrome is gone, till you're sitting in that dressing room and you're like, actually, I belong here?
Probably 2002 really is when you got catapulted in there a little bit through the league. We had a good league campaign with a really young team. I think we won that league. Sean Dowling and Brian Dowling got 2 points to snatch the league off Cork in 2002, and it was kind of then that you felt right. And again, I go back to Peter Barry. He was a guy who one evening I just distinctly remember him putting the arm around the shoulder and saying, you know, you need to stop admiring lads now and stop being happy just to be here. You have to kind of go after a spot now. So it was when that maybe penny dropped a little bit and you start getting games. But and 2002 was, you know, while I had some decent performances, you were still inconsistent really. You were up and down. And 2003 then was the year that I played really, really well, but calved in the All-Ireland final. Definitely got distracted in the run to the All-Ireland final.
Oh,
yeah, no, I was going quite well up to that point, and I just went a little bit off the boil. It was just, I suppose,
why were you distracted?
Just, you knew you were after having a good season, and in some ways you're starting to think ahead, and you're hearing some of the talk, and it's gas. Look, at that stage, you know, all-stars start being talked of, and all different things. And I have to be honest about it and say it did get in on me a tiny bit, thinking, right, if I play well here now, you know what? Whereas I hadn't the experience then of the psychological strength that you need to stay doing what you're doing, shut out all the external factors that don't, you know. And I just relaxed a little bit, I think is even the word maybe, that you just you allowed yourself to go, as Brian often said, just don't go soft now, in that you just stay focused on what we're about. But look, to be honest, you don't care, because we got over the line. You quickly put that to bed. But in the winter then you just you reflect on that and you use it as ammunition, say, look, can't let that happen again, or you want to be stay going, that you get those consistent performances right through and see the year out.
Can I ask you then about the peak of that Kilkenny side, and maybe hooking it back to present day and where Limerick are right now, and almost this air of invincibility that is around that group? And it's something we talk about from the outside, but a belief that internally in Limerick that they're not thinking like that, that actually, you know, they're still as driven as ever. They're trying to get into an underdog mindset when they're going into matches. Did you feel invincible 08, 09? Was there a sense of actually, you know, we are the best team by far in this country? I know you'd never say it out loud in the dressing room, but did you feel actually we are ahead of everybody else, and if we just turn up and we perform, we're going to win this game?
Yeah, we knew we had a massive bunch of guys, and we had huge competition with it. I think it was almost a combination of fear and confidence, because there was a fear of losing your place, and you went into those nights inside Nolan Park that, you know, you knew a week and a half or 2 weeks out you were to pick out the dates that you were going to have those internal matches. So that was where you had to fight off the competition for your spot. So you knew yourself, and I had spent, if you know, a few years where you were taking off and, you know, whatever, you were winning your jersey back, and then a few years on the sideline looking in, and, you know, deservedly so. There was remember 06, a bunch of young under 21s came into our squad, and they threatened to take the jerseys literally over, and that's the way you wanted it from Brian's perspective. But once I got the little bit of sulking, you know, I was naively thinking, oh yeah, sure, I'm an established player now, and it was silly thinking afterwards. But you had to fight for it. And then there was almost the confidence that, and I often heard Brian saying to us, what we've experienced in here in a trained environment, you know, you're going to be ready for championship matches. And hence why maybe there was those matches where the whistle was left in the pocket, and these were much talked about, but they were hot and heavy, but there was still never really a huge amount of stupidity, the odd little bit here and there. But by and large, it just conditioned you.
Was that a test in itself? Like, what happened when there were stupid moments and someone just pushed it that bit too far? Would Cody step in?
Oh yeah, no, I often heard him saying to lads, there's no place for stupidity, and that was the reality. But it was almost there was almost I suppose a real satisfaction in having those matches where you got absolutely bet us under, or physically demanding matches, intensity, competitiveness. You knew then you were ready, so you were going home, and there was almost a satisfaction in the soreness, which is like, and all players I think can relate to that you're coming out of matches, that internal matches, and you're wrecked, and you're even going, oh, I don't think I played that well, but it kept you sharp and it kept you scrapping for your place. And like you said there, come back to finish that point, yeah, we were confident that, I think there was a confidence and a belief in us, and Brian just built that into us and just embedded it in us. There's no one to touch you in terms of hurling, but it's ultimately your attitude and how you approach matches is what's going to define you. And we did. I think even we heard one day we went down to Wexford early 07 or 08. I think it was 08. We played them in a league match down in Wexford Park, or a Walsh Cup match, and we heard afterwards, you know, I think the lads were talking, we were asking, saying we were after doing 3 years of gym work at this stage. So there was always the hurling side of it was what, you know, I think people would say was maybe the traditional difference. But once you brought the conditioning into it, and I think it was maybe Henry or someone commented that day, he said, you know, in Wexford Park, he said you could see the 3 years of conditioning on us then. Like, we were literally pushing Wexford lads out of the way, and we were holding them up in the tackle all the time. So in some ways you kind of go, okay, so we are, you know, how, you know, there was that aspect was there. So it just gave you more confidence in yourself, and when you go out and you go well, then there's just that belief. And I think I see that now. I can relate to that. I think you see that in Limerick now. They back themselves every time. And I go back to 2009 then, when people start getting really close to us and we got frights. You then had times in matches where individuals stepped up, and you know, particularly 2009, Larks just went mad there coming down the straight against Galway and Tullamore when we were put to the pin of our collar, and he shot 4 points, and that got us over the line. Martin Comerford in the Leinster final in 2009 picked off 2 goals to beat Dublin by 7 points when Dublin really had our number that day. So
so do you look at Limerick, and listen, sport doesn't work in these sort of straight lines where the history doesn't matter that much, but it'd be easy to make a comparison and say maybe 2021 for Limerick was there, Kilkenny's 2008, and then there's a year on where teams probably in terms of the strength and conditioning have followed the path of Limerick, are starting to catch up a bit, but maybe individually, skill-wise, they still have enough. Do you feel that that's the trajectory that this Limerick team are on, or are they still on actually the best might yet be to come?
Yeah, it's hard to know, and that's the thing that probably has us all really intrigued and looking forward to seeing, you know, what they're capable of. But I think what's really admirable about them at the moment is that despite some of the big injuries they've had, they're still answering the questions, you know, and when you talk about needing a squad, well, more than ever their squad has been tested this year. And I think last year, yeah, you couldn't but stand back and admire how they performed in that All-Ireland and how well they played. And again, I do see similarities now this year. I think it's only natural that teams will start looking at them, and after 2 or 3 years now of having to look at them, and they are the benchmark, and rightly so, you're now saying, okay, they're finding ways to maybe figure them out a little bit. And one of those ways I look at is, even we'll say, you know, early doors, you look at, you know, some of the guys, like for example, Barry Nash is a preferred first receiver off puckouts. Tipperary targeted that, and they basically said to Limerick, you're not having him as a short puck-out recipient in that match. And it was only, you know, as the match wore on, he picked up a few, and he still had such an effect on the game. So teams are finding ways to get at them. But to be fair to them, you have to give them great credit, and you know, they are under the microscope now for different reasons. It just comes with the territory of being champions.
Yeah. Is Connacht such a brilliant coach that he looks at that, what Tipperary did to Barry Nash, and within a couple of weeks changes tactic from the puck out? Barry Nash is no longer the first receiver, or even for a couple of games they move away from him, so suddenly you've got 2 options. Like, is that the sort of evolution you see quite quickly from a coaching point of view from Limerick, that they can respond to that when teams figure little bits out? Yeah,
I think Limerick are at a place now, and I think when we talk about the word trust and a coach or a manager is building that in players, like, that's not something that, oh, he was a great player, so we automatically trust him. I think what's after happening is Paul Connacht has demonstrated to them, by sticking with what he's trying to get them to do, they trust him completely, and now they trust each other completely. I was down in Nolan Park in 2017, and I seen the kind of, and I spoke about this before, the prototype that Paul Connacht was trying to get these guys to do, and he was on the pitch in Icebit that night, and you could see glimpses of things working, other things where the lads weren't fully executing, whereas now, you know, he has polished that up. And on your point, I think I don't think you can probably adjust that and fix that in a week. But I think when you're at a stage like Limerick are, they have so many options. Like, there's not just, you know, Tom Morrissey doesn't make a primary run and then stand up. He makes a secondary run. He's also thinking, right, I've made the run to drag a defender out of place. Now where can I influence it? Now what's my next job? And I think they're very good at that. They don't dwell on a mistake either. I think, you know, and the example I used of that was last year in the semi-final. I think Jack Fagan is picking off a point for Waterford, and the camera was on him, and you're kind of going, oh. And if I was marking Jack Fagan in my time, you'd be like, oh no, he's after getting a point off me. So there's almost a psychological effect. Whereas next thing, play went back on, the camera came back onto the action, and there's Tom Morrissey picking up the ball on the other side of the pitch and he's putting the ball over the bar. So that to me is a brilliant thing, that they're not even dwelling on the play that has just happened. They're straight away on to the next thing. And I think, to finish that point, what you were saying about Limerick, okay, if one thing is not working, we have other options. So you look at the day against Tip, where Tip forced them to maybe not use Barry Nash or not use Dermot Burns. They were then able to go long and get some returns out of that up the field. So you have someone like Garrod Hegarty who can take ball high or low or whatever way. So they have the options, and I think they're so experienced now and they're so at ease and comfortable with how they play. They don't panic when it's not going wrong. And that is the ultimate probably endorsement for the likes of Paul Kinnerk, is that the lads aren't panicking. And I think for a coach, you don't want your players looking out to the sideline going, how do we fix this? They're able to fix it themselves, and maybe at half time now you can tidy that up.
Indulge me while you're in studio, while we're playing a bit of fantasy hurling, and we'll come back to the Munster final and the Leinster final, while we're talking great Limerick, great Kilkenny teams. If fantasy hurling, you were to put the two generations together and we're looking at matchups and how they would play out. So Kilkenny are playing Limerick and you're sitting down, Cody's putting it together. Who's picking up Aaron Gillane? JJ?
It's hard to pick. I'd probably send, I think JJ from a cuteness perspective, but equally I think I'd possibly send Jackie on him.
Why?
He'd poke the bear a little bit, I think. I think Jackie would bring something a little bit different. I think.
So you're saying JJ be happy to go 70 minutes straight fight with Aaron Gillane, whereas Jackie try and just rile him up in the first few.
He'll test him every which way. But like again, I suppose I've had the privilege or the misfortune of marking both of them repeatedly in training, and they presented different challenges. But I personally I would always class, for me, JJ was pound for pound the best defender I've seen, because the brain was always engaged and he was so cute about things he'd done, but yet he never got drawn into silly stuff either, or he didn't have to go down that route. He just was able to outthink his opponent. But I think Jackie is really that, I suppose a little bit more in your face, but from marking him as well, I think Jackie is the guy that really plays on the edge. And when I say that now, I'm not saying stupidly. He plays on the edge in that he will go that step in front of you. And he broke my heart so many nights in training. He would play in front of you because he knew that's where the ball is coming. And whereas if you're going to receive the ball over the top, so with how Gillane plays and that he hangs back sometimes, I'm probably going to go with JJ if push comes to shove. I think JJ, or maybe, do you know what? I'll split it. I'll put Jackie on him in the first half and JJ on him in the second half.
Who's picking up Cian Lynch?
Oh Jesus, Cian Lynch. Hard to know. I think you need someone probably really, I think, disciplines. I'll go a little bit left field. I know Brian Hogan would have played out there, but I think he's a guy that would be maybe made for Noel Hickey, because I think Noel Hickey would have such focus and such discipline that he would stick to him right through the match. And I think Cian Lynch is not the kind of guy that I think you want dragging the lad out of position. I think you need him on the ball, so therefore you need someone that's going to deprive him of the ball and really stick to that. So I suppose it depends where he plays, and he does play out the field. But if I was looking for someone to really nullify him and say, listen, I don't want him getting his hands on the ball, it's probably Noel Hickey.
Is Garrod Hegarty too big for Tommy Welsh to go near?
No, definitely not. Tommy was always able to pare lads down to his size when he was marking them. Hard to know. You're probably looking at someone that's maybe able to be, you have to be mobile, you have to be able to go all over the place. Oh Jesus, I don't know. I think Tommy, I'd rather have Tommy in the game than following someone around like that. I'd possibly send Brian Hogan. I think you maybe go height wise. You'd probably say, listen, he can match him height wise. He can physically compete with him. I'd probably go with Hoagie on Hegarty.
What about down the other end of the pitch then? Who do you think's picking up Eddie Brennan?
You can leave me out of this. Geez, I don't know who of them Limerick lads you'd like to mark.
You wouldn't like to see Sean Finn coming at you anyways?
No, probably not. He's really sticky. He's pound for pound probably as good a defender as there is at the moment in that regard. But I don't know. You'd like to think maybe that Barry Nash is such a good hurler that maybe you'd be able to go toe to toe with him, because you'd say, well, if I can hurt him with one or two, it might keep him honest.
Right.
But as a forward, there's nothing worse than watching your man tearing up the field with the ball. I would hate that. It would break my heart with that stuff. So
break Cody's heart.
Yeah, it would definitely. I'd probably Mike Casey, because he'd stay beside you. He'd like the battle.
What about Henry?
Henry, sure. I'd probably throw him out on Dermot Burns. The thing with Henry was he was always our central player, maybe, but I'd love to put him out on someone like that, because I think he forces the guy to maybe defend a little bit deeper, whereas Burns really loves to go forward. He's able to defend, don't get me wrong, but I think it would be just an intriguing battle to see, because Henry does like to work. I think that was his calling card as a player. He loved to work and he loved to overturn a fella. So I think you're looking at maybe saying Burns doesn't pass the 65, you have to stand him up and keep him back.
So what's the wild card then? What's the one area that Limerick team you're looking at going, we got somebody here that can do some damage?
I think the wild card would probably be Larks. I think I'd use Larky maybe on someone like Dan Morrissey. I think he would. I think Larks had just such a clever hurling brain. I think what you don't want is someone like him be nullified in the match. I think Larks can be very, very subtle about what he does, but I think it's, Dan Morrissey is, such a big physical presence, but I think, and strong in the air, but I think that's where Larks gave a lot of lads trouble. He was so unorthodox in the air, the way he was able to attack a ball. And
what way?
Just he was always able to kind of attack you from the blind side, and even it didn't matter what way he came through the air, he was always able to get his hand on it. And I just see him, I think over the years a few defenders really struggled with him, like 08 I think Tony Brown really struggled with him, and I just think because he just plays a little bit different than most guys. I think he's a hard guy to shut out of a match. So I think maybe Larks would be the wild card there, or maybe you could always throw Larks through the middle on Hannon.
I'm obviously sort of obsessing about the brilliance of the Limerick players there, and you think back, you faced a great Cork side at the end of their cycle, a Tipperary side who were coming force. Would Cody have obsessed about Limerick this way with that Kilkenny side? Would he have been going through individual Limerick players, looking at the matchups like that, or would he be still, we're going to play our own game here, lads?
No, to be fair to Brian, he always focused on us. He was, the only time I kind of really heard him, picking out maybe an opposition player was, 11 against Tip, where, look, we detailed, I think our backs were all given, you're looking after, like, Noel Hickey went after Owen Kelly, JJ, was, I think, John O'Brien a full forward, and then you had Jackie going on Lar. So there was a few specific matchups. But other than that, I think he always, he said it's up to yourself to, to some ways know who you're facing, know their strengths, know their weaknesses. But ultimately, he was very much on ourselves. So, and I have to say, like, that was one thing I can say hand on heart. He never ever picked out an opposition player and singled them out for special treatment. Right. It's one thing I have to say, because I think if I'm sitting approaching it, you might think, okay, maybe push that lad's buttons just a little bit. I mean, that's just part of the I suppose the button heads that goes on sometimes. But I have to say, it's one thing with him. He never ever, he never wanted an opposition player to get special treatment, because I think he looked at that and viewed that as distracting from your own game. So it was a waste of time. Whereas the ball was everything, and once you're focused on the ball, then your own hurling comes into play, whereas otherwise you're just involved in silly stuff maybe.
What about his own head, Cody, then, heading into a game like this against Galway, with all the fallout that came from the handshake with Henry? And listen, I don't know if we'll ever really know the two personalities involved as to what happened and how serious it was and how it'll go on until this weekend. But do you think, is Cody the type who actually, because of the way that the Galway went about that game, the controversy at the end, that like there'll be a different Cody in training this week because it's Henry and Galway?
Maybe. I don't know, because we're just surmising on all of that, and there's no doubt about it. The sideline will probably get a bit of attention on Sunday, but
you don't think they'll go down the Eddie Brennan route and a big public shake hands on the halfway line in front of everybody?
I don't know. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I think that's part of the intrigue for Saturday night. We're all waiting to see. But I think Brian is, I'd look at this stage. He's experienced enough to know that what's the important thing for Saturday night. The important thing is that Kilkenny were short, ultimately short, and while 1 point, maybe you say, God, they could have got a draw. I think, hand on heart, I can say I don't think Kilkenny were good enough that night above against, you know, the day they played Galway. They needed to be better, and Galway were probably the better team. So Brian I would expect him to focus on what's important, and that's the most recent performance, and that performance said we weren't good enough, and he's very matter of fact about that in training. From my experiences, he will call a spade and say it wasn't good enough, and that we're now facing into a Leinster final on Saturday. That stuff is something that I would imagine he'll just, it's in its place, but it's not the important thing. I think he'll deal with that afterwards. But the one thing that he will do is, look, Brian Cody doesn't back down. He's in charge of Kilkenny. He wants nothing more than a Kilkenny win on Saturday night, and the rest of it is, as he would see it, is probably filler and the bit of drama that could come on the side. And who knows? I'm looking forward to the match, because Brian has in the past got it right when a team hurts you the first day. So I'm waiting to see.
What do you think he'll do?
In terms of setup and that, I think they probably have to get the mix right. I think that the team has been unsettled as mob. I mean, they started the first 2 matches and went reasonably okay. I was in at the Laois match, and I still felt, while it was a comfortable win, there wasn't enough cutthroat ruthlessness in Kilkenny that night. And I think they will need to be very, very clinical in front of goal. I think they got turned back a few times when there was more goals there. And they're the little things that maybe manifest when you hit better opposition. But I think he will look at it and say that they got shut down in both matches a little bit too easily. And where I think he'll target is that the forwards did not work hard enough. I seen a graphic during the week of how good Galway are against opposition defence, and how they got, I think it was 17 turnovers against Dublin, something like that. And if you look at the Kilkenny match, I think they possibly got 116 from dispossessing Kilkenny players.
Right.
So that is an area that he will look at. But
and is that always an attitude thing, or is that a tactical setup?
Yeah, no, it's an attitude
that
thing.
The players find themselves in position from the way they're set up, that they're easily turned over.
It can kind of fall in under the tactical side of it, and maybe it straddles both tactical and kind of mindset. But I think what Brian has always kind of, again from my experiences with him, was that if the forwards are working hard and really chasing down, hunting down opposition players when they have possession, so that will be, I think, the first and foremost, that middle area. And at times they've done that, they've done it really well. But I think, to be fair, Dublin probably didn't present the challenge that maybe Kilkenny might have been spoken about as being a little bit better than they were against Dublin, and they'd done what they had to do. But I don't think Dublin asked enough questions of Kilkenny, and maybe that's why, when they hit Galway and Wexford, they just came unstuck a little bit. But I think it's a mindset is really what he'll go after this Saturday night.
So the amount of turnovers then that Galway are getting through, it sounds like Kilkenny of old. The obvious comparison is always going to be there as to what Shefflin has taken from all his time with Cody. Are you seeing similarities? Are you seeing signs from Henry Shefflin, the coach, that he learned from Cody? And what are the bits that he's taken from Cody, and what are the bits that you see is very much Henry? Yeah, well,
I've often said about where, I view Henry, he was probably one of the hardest working guys we had in the squad, I think, and even some of it we'll never know. He was so meticulous about even diet, everything. I think if you look at Henry, what made him what he was he was obviously well able to hurl and class when he got his hands on the ball, but he was still one of the hardest working guys we had in terms of, hunting opposition down, physically standing into opposition players. And right from the first league match, when Galway got a good win down in Limerick, and albeit, look, Limerick were at a different place at the time, but they probably put the foundations down that night of, I think even, was it Joseph Cooney, sailed into William O'Donoghue right from the clash and left one in him, like. So it was more, not stupidity, but we're not going to get pushed around either, that you have to engage. And I think that has been the one thing that I'm seeing that was what made Henry maybe the player he was that in his players. And even, a few years ago with Ballyhale, yeah, they have a really talented bunch, but they worked really hard. They hunted down defenders, they dispossessed them. And I think that is what Galway are about at the moment, because Galway have decent hurlers. They're well able to hurl and they'll hurt you when they get their hands on the ball. But there was an appetite for work, and I think Thomas Monaghan is probably one of the ones that really epitomises that. I've never, his energy levels is phenomenal. So that's, I think, what Galway are about first and foremost. I don't think there's any tactical genius going on there. They're able to adjust. They adjusted to nullify Owen Cody's influence in Salt Hill by sitting back, Pádraig Mannion a little bit deeper, but they work really, really hard off the ball.
And they forwards who are scoring as well. And like Conor Cooney's been a bit of a revelation. All the focus when Henry took over was obviously about Joe Canning, who is irreplaceable. And I wouldn't put Conor Cooney right there as of yet, but he needed somebody to step up and take on that mantle of being somebody that could trust to start racking up scores. Yeah,
definitely. And Conor is coming out of a massive campaign with his club where, he was, like, even I thought the last couple of years, his free taking has really... he's really, really accurate. You look at the best free takers now, I think they're only missing, the real good lads are missing one. If you miss more than 2 or 3 in a match, it's probably the difference now at this level. You look at maybe the night that Limerick and Waterford had 2 or 3 wides, that night, and that's what cost you. So a good free taker is everything. But it's probably even as much probably for Cooney as well as making him the centre point maybe of the attack. Maybe he's there as the spine, he's the go-to man as such, and that's sometimes the trick as a coach, is to get a lad to step up and to bring another, draw him on another little bit. He has gone for a strong spine. You've Whelan in there, who's just a brilliant target man and just an absolute animal for work. He's just never bet. He's so strong over the ball, so he has probably given those that little bit of responsibility, and you can say is it a little, a polish up of their ego, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's making a lad feel important. And Cooney has now said, look, we need someone to fill that void or fill that role and bring the other guys with you. And definitely Conor Cooney has stepped up.
What's your prediction for Saturday night?
Oh, sure, look, it's Kilkenny all the way. It comes back to that. Yeah, I think they'll have to pull out a huge performance. I think they're going to have to get... I'd like to see them test, Galway with something a little bit. Brian has occasionally done that, been able to put someone in a position that maybe the opposition weren't planning for. And I think that's what has hurt Kilkenny in the last couple of matches. We've been a fraction predictable. I think we have lads in certain roles, so maybe it's changed that up a little bit. I mean, is it a case of, I'd like to see maybe I'm talking about this while, I'd like to see TJ inside there, in around the square, and feed him as much as we can. Owen Cody then and others, just moving around, maybe interchanging a little bit from time to time. But I think we have to play a smart game, and it's obviously trying to get our really good players on the ball. So I don't know, will Kilkenny throw in a scud from the left? Perhaps. I'm hoping they'll do something to make Galway think a little bit, because I think if an opposition, if you're planning and you sail in and the opposition play right into your hands, it's great. Whereas it's just put the doubt in their head, and that could be something a little bit left field. I think Owen Cody is equally capable of playing as a centre forward. I think I'd love to see him go out there as well. He's well capable inside. He's a dog for punishment. He's well able to go physically with a fella. But I'd love to see him getting on ball as a centre forward in space and breaking onto a lot of ball, because I think he can really hurt a team.
Has Henry gone quiet in the WhatsApp group this week?
I'm not in any WhatsApp groups with Henry, so there's one actually with 3 or 4 of us where the golden oldies trying to get a reunion going. But once Henry took the Galway job, I think that was the end of that.
That was the end of that for a while anyways. Sunday then, Semple Stadium, there's massive hype around this game, and a real sense that Clare can push Limerick. Like, my sense is that Limerick, if they turn up, they win this by 7 or 8 points. Am I totally underestimating what Clare are going to bring to the party? That's guaranteed they're going to bring to the party?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see that happening. It's possible, yeah, it could happen. You'd say if Clare maybe lose their focus just a little bit, or they might, start thinking they're better than they are. Maybe they might think, as they start listening to the talk. But I think there's valid talk too, that they are good enough, and they've done it in a very understated way. But equally, I think Brian Lohan is the kind of guy that won't allow that. I don't think he'd allow the guys to start easing up a little bit. Right. And I think that was very reflective in the way they approached the Waterford match. So it won't shock me if they were to pull it off on Sunday, but they're going to probably have to pull out the performance of all performances still. But they do have the armoury to do it. I think Shane O'Donnell has gone out there, so it'll be interesting to see how they test Limerick, because Limerick have been asked a lot of questions. They've probably Flanagan and Kyle Hayes now are getting a little bit more fitter and back into the loop. So it'll be interesting to see, because Limerick generally don't deviate from their game plan. They stick to the process really, really well. But I think in Iver Quilligan, Clare have a guy who can hurt you a lot of ways. And I think, even you look at Peter Duggan, a full forward, like he's again a guy that's not afraid to get physical in himself. In my case, he will relish that again. The wide open spaces or the spaces in Thurles. So it's going to be intriguing, because I think Clare are smart on the sideline. They're clever in what they do, and they're able to adjust in game. But obviously still, look, like I said, Limerick, to be fair to them, and they're under pressure. The pressure is closing in on them a little bit. It's just the expectation.
Going for 4 in a row in Munster. I think it's 40 years since the county did that.
You'd say sometimes teams are getting closer to them now, so they have to get out by the skin of their teeth. But to be fair to them, they keep answering those questions, and it's a battle that they'll relish. I think they'll really relish this. They look like a team that just love the challenges at the moment, and the energy levels are there.
The obvious tactical question will be about Tony Kelly, and do Limerick man mark Tony Kelly? Do you expect them to? And if so, who's the best man marker?
Arguably their best man marker is Sean Finn. But do Limerick want Sean Finn out around midfield or that? So I think what you'll see with Limerick is, I think they're very good to hand over. I think it's something, you'd be watching on the high behinds, and they're very organised. Their communication is good, and they're straight away thinking, where's the danger? So they're not afraid to leave their men with a view to covering off the danger. But obviously you cannot leave someone like Tony Kelly marauding around the pitch unchecked. So I think what you're going to see is probably Donoghue and Dara Donovan will definitely share that work. They will help out with that. Tom Morrissey drops deep, Hegarty drops deep, so it could be that, occasionally they'll be doubling up. They'll definitely, if the ball is near him, they'll want to cut down the space that he has to operate in. And again, look, they play a physical game too. They won't be afraid to, get close to Tony Kelly, get a couple of hits on him, because I think that's what you do. And there's a legitimacy about that too. Like you're saying, look, if you get an opportunity to let a lad know you're around, that's just part and parcel of the game. And obviously,
do you think
the rules,
and I don't want to say the reputation around Limerick, because it's probably a bit harsh, but the red cards that they've received will be playing in their heads in any way around how they approach Tony Kelly and leaving one on him? Yeah,
it doesn't seem to have, and I think in some ways I'm a little bit surprised that they haven't tempered that a little bit. I think you have to taper your approach there. I think there's certain instances where you have to say, well, look, we have to be smarter, we have to be cute, and I think that, rightly or wrongly, when you are All-Ireland champions and you're the team to beat, sometimes you may not get those 50-50 calls, and sometimes that's just the nature of it. But from my experiences and what we were saying, look, it doesn't matter about the ref. We have to get our hands on the ball, the match has to be played on our terms, and that to me has to be Limerick's focus. They work really hard off the ball. I admire it, absolutely. But I think as a player, and you get involved sometimes silly, you have to, if you're giving a ref an opportunity, I think that's where the smart players really come into their own. That they go, look, it's being able to taper your approach and not get caught out like that. Because I think sometimes we're seeing, whether rightly or wrongly, I think you just have to be smart about that. And if I'm, say Garrod Hegarty, and it's not fair maybe to we're talking about this, but it is a talking point. Like for him now, what's his best? How does he hurt teams on the scoreboard? He's devastating when he does that. So again, if I'm maybe John Kiley, and I'm not obviously, and who am I to tell him to do his job? But you'd be kind of saying to him, listen, don't mind all the noise, don't mind getting dragged into all that stuff. Smile and take it, just burst through it and hurt them where it really, really matters, and that's on the scoreboard every single time, because he's a freak of nature in terms of his fitness and his hurling ability. The last day I think I seen him cutting the ball over the bar, like from midfield on the run, and he moved the ball from left over to right, which you don't see your golfers doing. So that's what he's capable of from 70-80 yards.
Yeah, the problem with Limerick is they've a lot of freaks of nature, it feels like.
They do, and none more so. A guy I really admire, and he gets kudos in fairness, but maybe he goes about it in such an understated way, as Tom Morrissey. I just love the way he goes about his business. He just glides past defenders, and yet he doesn't get knocked. He's able to get in his tackles, and he is still, in the days this year that they've struggled, he has come up with really big scores for them. And if you have two guys like that, I mean, they're just, for a manager, they're a joy. Look, having someone like that in your team is just gold.
What about from Clare's defensive point of view then, and Gillane, if they don't have a JJ Delaney or a Jackie Tyrrell? Rory Hayes is having a fine season. Would you put him in Gillane?
No, possibly not. I think there's other guys there, but I think Cleary is made for Gillane. I think they locked horns in the league earlier on, where Gillane, lashed out, and I just think that's probably the match there, because he will test him every way. And look, occasionally Gillane has got drawn into that a little bit. So I think that the matchups are going to be intriguing alone. That once the ball is thrown in, and after the first 2 or 3 minutes, that's quickly always the scurry. Who's marking who? What have they done? Oh, look, I think Cleary will go with Gillane because he plays inside in the edge of the square, and I think he loves that role. So, but Rory Hayes, could he do a job on him? I think he would. But again, Gillane is so elusive at times. He's really good under a dropping ball, so maybe from that point of view, Cleary ticks the box from the height side. I heard
the lads Skehill and Paul Murphy saying that maybe Rory Hayes was the best cornerback in the country right now.
Yeah, he's not far off it, in fairness. He's up there with the top 3 or 4. You're looking at someone like Finn is obviously the benchmark for it, but I think Hayes is right up there beside him. There's a few, like you'd say, was Owen O'Donnell as a full back up to now. But yeah, I think if you were turning around and maybe picking...
He's a footballer.
He's gone to the football now, yeah. He's gone to the dark side.
Spent all that time asking about Con, and it turns out they're still going the other way.
But yeah, look, I think if you're looking at your benchmark of your if you were to say pick a fantasy team in the morning, definitely, a full back line that has Rory Hayes and even Conor Cleary in it, they're up there with any of them. So, but Rory Hayes and cornerback and Sean Finn are 2 cornerbacks. I think you'd be more than happy facing into whatever the opposition have.
So, by the sounds of it, you think this will be a tight game?
Yeah, I do. I think it'll go down to the wire, because I do think Clare have huge impetus coming into this. And equally, look, could one of the teams go mad at the start? They're capable of it, but I just think this is just set up to be an absolutely rip-roaring match. Maybe we'll be disappointed. It mightn't be the spectacle we're expecting. It could be a low-scoring match. But I just think the intensity levels of this are going to be phenomenal. And I think, obviously, the bench for Limerick has been so good for them. So it's when it's coming down the 15 minutes to go and legs are really starting to flag a little bit, it's when Clare or when Limerick do unload the bench, have Clare something, because I do think Clare have a good bench as well. So it'll be intriguing, because I think we're seeing with hurling now that definitely it's such a high octane game. With 15 minutes to go, there's definitely lads on the pitch. Your 5 subs are so important to see it out for you. So in that regard, it's going to be intriguing. But it's an old school one. I just think it's almost a throwback to that famous 96 match. I think it's on that level, because if any team wants to take down Limerick, it will be Clare. And look, there's obviously a storied rivalry there. Yeah. And I think it's just beautifully set up for a Munster final.
Eddie, great stuff. We went off on a few old tangents in the end there, but brilliant. It's going to be a cracking weekend. Enjoy it.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Should be good.